Some crimes shake a community. Others leave scars that never fade. But this is a case that left even the most hardened detective speechless. A little girl, barely 10 years old, suffered a fate no child should ever endure. Starved. Abused. Betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect her. This is the heartbreaking, horrific, and gut-wrenching case of Emani Moss. Thank you for watching. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please share your location in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with future content. Emani Gabrielle Moss was born on April 23, 2003, an innocent child thrust into a world that had already failed her before she had even taken her first steps. Her biological mother, battling a relentless addiction, found herself incapable of providing the care and stability a newborn deserved. Whether out of desperation or a fleeting moment of clarity, she made the painful decision to relinquish her parental rights. This left Emani in the custody of her father, Emani Moss, a man who, at the time, seemed like he could offer her a chance at a normal life. A fresh start. A home where she would be cherished and protected. But that hope was an illusion. What should have been the beginning of a childhood filled with love, safety, and warmth instead became a descent into a nightmare. Emani's life was not one of bedtime stories or playful laughter echoing through a happy home. There were no comforting embraces to chase away bad dreams. No birthday parties filled with balloons, cake, or the eager excitement of unwrapping presents. Instead, there was silence. Fear. Hunger. As the years passed, the little girl endured a reality no child should ever face. Neglect became her daily companion. Hunger gnawed at her small frame, and loneliness settled into her bones. She learned to shrink into the shadows, to be unseen, unheard, because drawing attention to herself only invited pain. The absence of a mother's love was quickly replaced by something far worse, cruelty. Not the kind that left fleeting bruises, but the kind that stripped away innocence, crushed a child's spirit until they were barely more than a ghost in their own home. And eventually, it escalated beyond neglect. Beyond fear. Emani Moss would come to face something no child should ever endure. Emani Moss was expected to be Emani's guardian and protector. However, his past was marred by violence. In 2004, he was convicted of battery and second-degree child cruelty after assaulting Emani's biological mother in her presence. Despite this history, he retained custody of Emani, a decision that would have dire consequences. In 2009, Emani remarried. His new wife, Tiffany Moss, was a preschool teacher. This union, however, marked a turning point in Emani's life, leading to increased suffering. Tiffany's resentment towards Emani grew over time. In March 2010, when Emani was just 6 years old, she did something most abused children never dare to do: she spoke up. At school, she confided in a nurse, her small voice carrying the weight of unbearable fear. She was terrified to go home. She whispered that she had gotten a bad report card and that her punishment would be severe. The school staff listened, and when they examined her, the truth was impossible to ignore. Emani's frail body was covered in bruises. The deep purple and black welt stretched across her arms, legs, and back, each one a testament to the cruelty she endured. The marks weren't from a simple spanking or a harsh reprimand. They had been inflicted with a metal curtain rod. Authorities intervened. Tiffany was arrested and charged with first-degree child cruelty. For a moment, it seemed like justice would prevail, that someone had finally stepped in to save Emani from the horrors of her home. But the legal system failed her. Tiffany didn't go to prison. Instead, she was sentenced to just 5 years of probation. No jail time. No real consequences. And worst of all, Emani was sent back to the very home where she had been brutalized. After Tiffany's release, the abuse didn't just continue, it escalated. Following this incident, Emani was placed with her grandmother, Robin, for about 6 months. During this period, her school performance improved. However, Emani fought for custody, and in the fall of 2010, the Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services, DFCS, returned Emani to him. Robin suspected ongoing abuse but couldn't convince authorities to grant her custody. The abuse escalated. In July 2012, Emani attempted to run away twice. In one instance, she told authorities that her stepmother had tied her up with a belt and placed her in a cold shower. Despite these reports, there wasn't enough evidence to charge Emani or Tiffany at the time, and Emani was returned to their care. By 2013, the family had moved frequently, often isolating Emani from extended family. Emani worked long hours, leaving Emani under Tiffany's supervision. Emani, now living under constant surveillance, learned that crying out for help only made things worse. She became quieter, more withdrawn, more obedient. If she was invisible, she thought, maybe the pain would stop. But Tiffany made sure it didn't. Tiffany's resentment festered. She blamed Emani for her own shortcomings and took out her frustrations on the child. Her actions became more calculated and cruel, tightening her control over Imani's life. Food became a weapon. While the rest of the family ate full meals, Emani was given scraps, if she was given anything at all. When she grew weaker, Tiffany punished her for being sluggish. When she lost weight, Tiffany mocked her, telling her she was disgusting. Emani became a prisoner in her own home. She was withdrawn from school, supposedly to be homeschooled, but in reality, she was being hidden. No teachers to notice the bruises. No classmates to hear her cries. No one left to save her.
Tell the jury how you found out about that and how that happened.
I was at work and I get a phone call from I think a detective. I can't remember her name, but I know I got a phone call from a detective saying I had to come to the police station. They didn't tell me what. They just said I needed an emergency. I think it said pertaining to your child. So I just left work, let my manager know, and I just hopped in the car and just drove all the way down there.
Right. While you were at the police department, did you find out that your wife had been accused of beating your child?
Yes, when I got down there.
And did you give a statement to the police in that regard?
Yes, I spoke with the detective.
And did you become aware that she was eventually arrested?
Yes, she got arrested there.
And do you know whatever happened with that case?
She took a plea of probation, 5 years to my knowledge.
Tell me what life was like after that at your house.
It was rough.
Was Tiffany allowed to work as a teacher after that?
No.
Did Tiffany ever work after 2010?
No.
So, what did she do?
Stayed at the house.
Stayed at Pearlie's house?
Yeah. Wherever we were living, she stayed at the house.
Right. Did you feel like her job at that point was to take care of the kids?
Yes.
During the time you were at Pearlie's house, did you ever see any issues with Emani in terms of her weight or?
No.
Did you ever see any problems between Emani and Tiffany while you were at Pearlie's?
Yes.
Tell me about those.
Ever since going back to 2010, ever since then it was like a love-hate relationship.
Tell me, explain to the jury what you mean by a love-hate relationship.
You know, her and Emani was like it was always something they couldn't get along.
Did you ever know of Tiffany from 2010, after 2010, to discipline Emani?
No, not until that incident.
All right. I want to ask you, when I say discipline,
Okay.
Discipline a child, what does that mean to you?
At that time, spanking.
But are there other ways to discipline children?
Yes.
Is sending to bed without their supper a way of disciplining a child?
No, that's not.
Is putting them in a corner and putting them in timeout a discipline for a child?
Yes.
So you said that when you said that Tiffany didn't discipline Emani, are you aware of whether or not she used any of the other things other than a spanking to correct her behavior?
Yes, after let me go back. When we had the incident where she spanked Emani in 2010, we had to take a class. I took it called the fatherhood program, and I think she had to take anger management, and then we had in-home counseling. Because at the time I was not aware of the other form of discipline, because I grew up from the old school. You got a spanking, and that was it.
So you learned about other forms of discipline.
But at the time I didn't know, but spanking. And
so after 2010, did you decide that you were going to use the other forms of discipline other than spanking?
Yes. And
do you know whether or not Tiffany did that too?
Yes, best of my knowledge, I think she did.
Right. And so you moved in did you say in September of 2013?
Yeah.
To the apartment?
Yes, sir.
Where did you live? Did you ever live with your mother?
Yes, that was, you talking about me and Tiffany or just?
You and Tiffany and the children?
No, sir.
Not, the three of you didn't live there?
No.
Did Emani ever live with your mother?
Yes, during the incident in 2010.
And after that, was Emani placed with your mother?
No, sir.
Well, how did she end up over there then?
You said at my mom's house?
Yeah, I mean...
Okay, how did you get in 2010, we had the spanking incident. Tiffany spanked Emani. She had whips and stuff all on her arms and back, I think legs, a belt whip.
Okay. But the question was, how did she end up staying at your mother's house after?
Defects. We moved her out of our home and put it with grandma.
And how long did she live with grandma after the 2010 incident?
I want to say 6 months.
Did you or Tiffany ever did you go to court to get her back, or were you just allowed to by defects?
No, I had to go, it was required for me to, it was required for Tiffany to take anger management and in-home counseling. The other program was volunteer. I didn't have to do it, I just did it.
The one that you talked about, Dad's class.
Yes.
All right.
Her father, Emani Moss, knew what was happening. He saw his daughter wasting away, saw the bruises, heard the muffled sobs. But he did nothing. Whether out of fear or loyalty to Tiffany, he became complicit in his daughter's suffering. In May 2013, during a Mother's Day visit, family members noticed that Emani's hair had been cut, a possible sign of further abuse. The final months of her life were a slow, torturous descent. Starved. Beaten. Silenced. Until there was nothing left of the little girl who had once dared to ask for help. Emani's absence due to work allowed Tiffany's abuse to continue unchecked. Emani's internal conflict grew. He noticed Emani's deteriorating condition but failed to act, paralyzed by fear and denial. He rationalized his inaction, hoping the situation would improve, but guilt gnawed at him. By late October 2013, Emani's condition worsened. She could barely move. Her body, ravaged by starvation, had lost the strength to fight. She had once cried for help, whispered pleas when no one was looking, silent tears in the darkness. But by now, she was too weak to speak. Emani's fragile body could take no more. One evening, Emani found her unresponsive in the bathtub. She lay motionless, her life slipping away, her eyes moving erratically. She was only 10 years old, yet she weighed a mere 32 pounds, the size of a toddler. Instead of seeking medical help, Tiffany insisted they couldn't take her to a doctor because she was too thin, fearing authorities would intervene. They put Emani to bed, and a few days later, she died. In a desperate attempt to conceal the crime, Emani Moss panicked. He realized what had happened, but instead of calling for help, instead of breaking the cycle of horror, he chose a path even more unthinkable. Tiffany and Emani weren't just abusers. They became something else entirely, monsters willing to go to horrifying lengths to cover their crime. Emani Moss took his daughter's lifeless body and placed it inside a trash bag. But even then, Tiffany was the one calling the shots. Instead of remorse, she showed only one emotion: cold, calculated determination. She had a plan. Together, they carried Emani's remains to an apartment complex in Gwinnett County, Georgia. There, in a final act of horror, they set fire to the bag, hoping to erase the evidence. The flames flickered in the darkness, consuming what was left of a life that had barely begun. Emani Moss had been tortured, starved, discarded like garbage. Overwhelmed by guilt, her father, Emani, eventually called the police, leading to their arrest. Tiffany Moss had no history of harming her own children. To the outside world, she was a mother, a wife, and a preschool teacher, someone entrusted with shaping young minds. But for Emani, she was a nightmare. The world finally saw what had been happening behind closed doors. But for Emani, it was too late. Her death was not just a tragedy, it was an indictment of every system that had failed her. A brutal reminder of what happens when cries for help are ignored. And the worst part? She never had a chance. In the early hours of November 1, 2013, Emani Moss found himself engulfed in a maelstrom of guilt and fear. The weight of his daughter's death pressed heavily upon him, and the gruesome attempt to conceal her demise had failed. Desperation gnawed at his conscience. After a sleepless night, he made a decision that would alter the course of events. At approximately 4 a.m., Emani dialed 911, his voice trembling as he confessed to being suicidal and revealed the harrowing details of Emani's death. Upon receiving the call, law enforcement swiftly arrived at the Moss residence. Emani met them, his demeanor a mix of distress and resignation. He claimed that Emani had ingested chemicals, leading to her death, and in a panic, he had attempted to cremate her body in a trash can. Officers, skeptical of his account, proceeded to the location he indicated. There, they discovered the charred remains of a child, a sight that would haunt even the most seasoned among them. As the investigation unfolded, inconsistencies in Emani's story became evident. Detectives pressed him for the truth, and under mounting pressure, Emani confessed to the full extent of the tragedy. He admitted that Emani had been starved over a prolonged period, leading to her death, and that in a desperate bid to hide their crime, he and his wife, Tiffany, had attempted to burn her body. This revelation sent shockwaves through the community, as the horrific nature of the abuse came to light. Tiffany Moss, upon learning of her husband's confession, fled the scene with her biological children. She dropped them off at her mother's residence before surrendering herself to the authorities. Both she and Emani were charged with multiple offenses, including malice murder, felony murder, and first-degree cruelty to children. The legal proceedings that followed would captivate and horrify the public. In 2015, Emani Moss accepted a plea deal, admitting guilt to charges of felony murder and concealing a death. In exchange for his testimony against Tiffany, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. His decision to cooperate was seen by some as an attempt to atone for his inaction and complicity, while others viewed it as a self-serving move to avoid the death penalty. Tiffany Moss, however, chose a different path. Rejecting a plea deal that would have spared her life, she opted to represent herself in court. This decision was met with astonishment, as she declined legal counsel and chose to face the charges alone. Throughout the trial, she remained silent, offering no opening statement, cross-examining no witnesses, and presenting no evidence in her defense. Her stoic demeanor and refusal to engage left many questioning her motivations and mental state. The jury, after deliberating for a brief period of less than 3 hours, found Tiffany guilty on all counts. In a historic verdict, she was sentenced to death, making her the first woman in Georgia in over 5 years to receive such a sentence. The swiftness of their decision underscored the overwhelming evidence and the profound impact of the case. On May 1, 2019, the judge affirmed this recommendation, sentencing Tiffany Moss to death by lethal injection. This verdict rendered her the only woman on Georgia's death row at that time. Emani Moss's life was marred by unimaginable suffering, her pleas for help unheard until it was too late. In death, however, her story reverberated far beyond her immediate community. It became a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities that many children face and the paramount importance of vigilance in safeguarding their well-being. Her tragic end serves as a clarion call to society, to listen, to act, and to ensure that no child endures such torment in silence. This tragic Emani's case highlights not only the personal failures within the Moss family but also systemic issues within child protective services. Despite multiple reports and interventions, Emani remained in a dangerous environment, ultimately leading to her tragic death. It serves as a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities within our child welfare systems and the dire consequences of inaction. Reflecting on Emani's story compels us to examine the responsibilities of caregivers, the effectiveness of child protective services, and society's duty to protect its most vulnerable members. Her life and untimely death urge us to confront these uncomfortable truths and strive for meaningful change. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share. Your support helps us grow and continue bringing you shocking stories like this. If you suspect child abuse, speak up. Call the authorities. Save a life. Don't let another innocent child become another tragic case.